Okay, so let's see the practical application we are going to develop now.
About to focus on configuration changes. If I clear this and if I do a configuration change, let's say if I rotate this and now it goes from portrait to landscape, see what happens. As it said over here, the activity is destroyed and created. So this activity should be destroyed and created. Let's see whether it has happened. See, it has destroyed because of that configuration change, and see, it has created because it has gone to the on destroy method and on create method, and it has printed my lines. So now you understand what this talks about, right? So it has destroyed and got created. So whenever you want, because it's getting destroyed, if you want to retain the UI state, that means, for example, if there was some, if the user was playing a game and if there were some scores displayed, let us say, for example, if this is a game and if it displayed a score at the top right hand side, and when it changes, what will happen is, because of this configuration change, because it's destroying the activity, you will lose the data, you will lose the attribute data, right? So you have to make sure to persist them. We have discussed this in a previous lesson as well, but once again, just to revise it, you will have to use view models, or we haven't touched view models yet, or we have done this, or is on save state.
Okay, so let's continue to develop this application now.
Hi everyone, the lesson is Android Activities Part 6, Activity State Changes. We'll be using these tools and references. You need to make sure you look at Activities Part 5 lesson, which is the lesson before this, before you continue this. You can find it in the description section. In this session, you will be learning about handling activity state changes, then activity state changes when they occurs. For example, in configuration changes can occur. For example, when a phone app is in the portrait or the landscape, or handling multi windows, right? If not, it can happen if activity or dialog appears in the foreground, right? All of a sudden, let's say, right? Or user taps the back button, or system kills the app process. So this can cause activity state changes. So what are activity states? We will look at that as well in a little while. As usual, it's going to be practical demonstrations. So uh, we'll if we look at the developer docs now, we are in activities, right? So we are talking about activities, and what are these activity state changes, or what are these activity states? So in the previous lesson, we learned about different activity states, such as on create, on start, on resume, on pause, and even in a previous lesson, we learned about the activity life cycle. So in that, we even learn about, if I go into that, activity life cycle, for example, we learn about the different states. So that is what we are talking here as activity states, right? Now these activity states can change due to different reasons. So that is what we are talking here, right? See, when I say it can change due to different reasons, due to, let's say, a user changing the font from portrait to landscape due to rotation of the font, uh, for that it will trigger certain activity states, right? So that's what we are talking here. What are these activity state changes and what can cause them? So different events, right, can cause activity transition from one state to another, right? So different events can cause this transition. Events is, once again, as I said, changing from portrait to landscape, etc., right? Now also looking at this, so or it can be a user tapping the back button, something like that, right? So the first one in the list, configuration changes, portrait to landscape, and handling multi-window cases. So this can happen. So there are a number of events that can trigger a configuration change. So when you say a configuration change, it's a portrait from portrait to landscape, for example. The most prominent example is a change between portrait and landscape. That is the best example. Other cases can cause configuration change include changes to language or input devices, etc. Those also can cause configuration changes. One good example is from changing from portrait to landscape. So rotation. What do you mean by portrait to landscape? Something like this. Let's say I got this app, right? And then let's say I rotate the phone, right? Let's say if I rotate left, now this app changed from the portrait to landscape. Now this is a new configuration because why do I say it's a new configuration? Because compared to the previous portrait angle, now in the landscape angle you have a larger width compared to, let's say, compared to the portrait where you have a smaller width. Once again, see, when you change to landscape you have a larger. So this is a example for a configuration change, right? This is a good example for a configuration change, right? But keep in mind, when you are doing this practical, if you want this to happen, you have to drag this and click this icon and enable it, right? These rotations, otherwise you won't see that. Okay, awesome. So when a configuration change occurs, the activity is destroyed and recreated. What does that mean? So when a configuration change occurs, activity is destroyed and recreated. So as you know, in on different phases, see, on create, on start, on resume, on pause, on stop, and see, on destroy. So this is what it says: creating and destroying, and then in between many phases. In between many phases. So okay, now let's look at that. 1 second. So when a configuration change occurs, activity is destroyed and recreated. So you can see it now. To see it in this on these lifecycle methods, right? We looked at this in a previous example also, in a previous practical. We, for example, part 3, less activities lesson part 3, we had a look at the same thing, but once again I'm taking the same example. So in this we got two activities. Let's say the first activity we connect to the second. So what we have done here is, in both of these activities we have put these life cycle methods. You remember in the previous practical, say on start, on resume, and then we have put output lines so that you can see when it goes into on resume it says inside on resume, if it goes to on pause it says on pause. So then you will see it in the output of the run window. So if I go to the run window, expand it and clear this and show it to you, let's say once again, let's clear and let's stop this and run. So you remember in a previous lesson we did something very similar. So when you run this, you will see first time, see, it works. So when you run your app for the first time, it says it's inside on start. See, even before that it's inside on create. See, it goes from on create to on start to on resume. However, our focus is about to focus on configuration changes. So if I clear this and if I do a configuration change, let's say if I rotate this and now it goes from portrait to landscape, see what happens. As it said over here, the activity is destroyed and created. So this activity should be destroyed and created. Let's see whether it has happened. See, it has destroyed because of that configuration change, and see, it has created because it has gone to the on destroy method and on create method, and it has printed my lines. So now you understand what this talks about, right? So it has destroyed and got created. So whenever you want, because it's getting destroyed, if you want to retain the UI state, that means, for example, if there was some, if the user was playing a game and if there were some scores displayed, let us say, for example, if this is a game and if it displayed a score at the top right hand side, and when it changes, what will happen is, because of this configuration change, because it's destroying the activity, you will lose the data, you will lose the attribute data, right? So you have to make sure to persist them. We have discussed this in a previous lesson as well, but once again, just to revise it, you will have to use view models, or we haven't touched view models yet, or we have done this, or is on save state instance on save instance state, you have to use this method and do it, right? We have done it in a previous lesson. We will also look at in detail further. Okay, then there's another instance where it can happen, go into a configuration change, such as the app enters into multi-window mode. So in certain devices you can go into multi-window mode, and then in that case once again certain phases will trigger. Then another example, activities or dialogues appears in the foreground. So if a new activity or dialogue appears in the foreground, right? Say for example, let's say the user is using this app, but let's say all of a sudden while using the app, let's say he receives a phone call. So when he receives a phone call, if another activity pop-ups, right, um, for that, then that is what is meant by activity can appear, or dialogue can appear in the foreground, right? It can be even a dialogue box, right? So then what will happen is, on top of this, the new activity appears in the foreground, right? Taking focus and partially covering the activity in progress. So let's say it's talking about partial covering. So let's say alert pop-ups. So then this covers partially and alert is on the top, but you will see this in the background. So that is activity or dialogue appears in the foreground. That's what it means. So then what happens is the current activity will be called the on pause. When the covered activity returns, once again, if you acknowledge to the dialogue, and then if the other one returns back, then it goes to on resume. So hope you understand. So have a look at this, read more about this, then you will understand more. Same when user tap the back button. If the user tap the back button, let's say okay, let's say you are here, you will say hello for example, and you will say send. Right now you are here. Now let's say the user taps the back button, right? Say user taps this is the back button. When user tap the back button, see what happens, right? So what happens is the previous activity got destroyed. See, the display message got destroyed. So you can see that my output message is coming. So now you know it has destroyed the previous activity due to the back button. As you can see, it gets destroyed. But before that, before destroying, it goes to on pause, on stop, and then on destroy, right? So you can see on pause, on stop, and then on destroy. Then because it came back, see what happened to the main activity. It it came to on start and on resume. So you have to match this with the understanding of this. So on start and on resume. So when you came back, the second activity got paused. See, display message got paused, then that got stopped and got destroyed. That's the second act. Then because you came back, the first activity came to on start and on resume. So this is very important for you to understand that this thing we are talking here, because if you want to be a good mobile application developer, you need to know this, and then you have to write appropriate code on each of this method depending on the app you are developing. Then finally the system might kill the app process. This may be to get some extra memory. So if it kills, once again read this, you will get more information. So now at the end of this simple and short lesson, you understood the importance of handling activity state changes, because when certain activity status changes, such as configuration changes or user clicks the back button, now you know that sometimes the activity can get destroyed and recreated. So if it gets destroyed, you have to make sure that you have to restore the data, right? To restore the data, you have to use certain methods, right, which we have already discussed on a previous lesson, plus we'll discuss further in a later lesson as well, right? Awesome. So this was a short lesson but a very important lesson for you, right? Awesome. So then you did a practical demonstration. Conclusion, you learn about this stuff. You can find the link to download, right? And we use Android developer docs for this. And have a look at our other videos in this series, and we are very excited to see you in those videos, and see you in those videos.